these are the bio kids that don't seem to have a lot going on and they seem okay and well adjusted, then they might be, but they also might just be kind of presenting that way in order to uphold the balance of the family in the best way they know how. So that's the tricky thing for parents is realizing, is my kiddo okay? What areas do they need support from me? Are they taking on and holding family stress in a way that isn't theirs to bear, isn't theirs to carry?
Welcome to the Riverside Project podcast. We are mobilizing Houston to empower families and transform generations. We hope these conversations will give you a greater understanding of the issues facing our community and inspire you to find your place along the river. Welcome, everybody, to the Riverside Project podcast. Today, we have Daniela Coats. She is the founder of With Siblings, an organization that exists to support the birth children in foster and adoptive families by equipping parents and professionals through training and resources. She also serves birth kids as a therapist at Be Still Counseling. Daniela is a self-identified bio kid, having grown up in a family that fostered. She is now a mom to kids by both birth and adoption. Daniela, thank you so much for taking a few minutes out of your day to have a conversation with us.
I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Well, tell us a little bit about who you are and this organization that you're running. I think you have a very unique story in this space, having grown up in a home where your family fostered. And so you were kind of a bio kid in a foster family. And so I'm really excited to hear a little bit more about your story and then the work that you do today. So start us off by just introducing yourself.
Yeah. Well, like you said, I founded an organization called With Siblings, where really primarily what I do is trainings and resource development, those kinds of things for families. And then I keep that separate from my work as a therapist. So I work at a practice that I don't own. And I see kids of all backgrounds, but I really heavily work with bio kids and foster adoptive families. So that's like the professional side right now. But I did work for a child placing agency for a number of years, training, recruiting foster parents. I've also done some like adjunct instructing work for some universities for social work. So I have a variety of experience, but really foster care and adoption is where it's kind of always been. And then the personal side where I lived it as a kid, as a bio kid, and now I'm living it as a parent with kids by birth and adoption. So I have kind of these three different perspectives on this.
Yeah, I love that. Tell me a little bit more just at the very beginning, right? What was it like growing up in a family? Why did your family decide to foster? And were you old enough to be brought into that conversation? Or it's just like one day there were kids in your home? Tell me a little bit more about how all of that came to be.
Yeah. So my dad first volunteered for a camp called Royal Family Kids Camp, now for the children. And he volunteered at that camp for a number of years. And I can just remember him coming home from that camp and he would be really emotional, very teary. He was really impacted by this group of kids who had experienced things that, kiddos should never have to experience. And so kind of from there is where my parents said, okay, we've got to do something about this. And so we actually decided that we were going to adopt. The plan was actually not to foster. And that's a really long story. There were kids that were placed in our home as an adoptive placement, but before the adoption was finalized, it was an adoption disruption. And then from there, very heartbroken. It was a very complicated situation. But from there, we're like, okay, what do we do? We're approved. How can we still serve kids? And so that's when we fostered for I think 7 or 8 years after that. And then I think my parents closed their home, if I'm remembering kind of timeline correctly. And then once again at Royal Family Kids Camp, this time I was an adult and volunteering. There was a camper who was available for adoption, who happened to be my camper, and my parents ended up adopting her, and now she's my younger sister. And so that was kind of like the last thing that they did.
Gosh, and I assume, not to age you, I mean, that was a different time too. Now that you're an adult, I assume that you've also had kind of a front row seat at how the foster care system has shifted over time and how adoption has been viewed over time. What have you seen in terms of how the system has changed and how the perception of adoption has changed? You just have this, again, interesting perspective of having done this really almost your whole life. What have you seen as that has shifted or changed?
It's hard for me to know exactly what shifted just in terms of system itself, because I first lived in Minnesota and then I lived in Texas. And so
there's a shift there too.
Yeah. So it's hard to know what changed the state or the system or, I would say foster care, my experience was in Texas for the most part. And then even professionally, I worked here in the state. So I would say, as far as from the very beginning, people didn't have an understanding of trauma, at least not like they do today. And so that's something I definitely think has changed. Like back then, even 20 or whatever years ago, a little more than 20 years ago, the people just didn't understand the way that we do now. I will say one thing that's not shifted as much is just the fact that there isn't a lot of resources out there for bio kids and parents knowing how to help them. Because my parents sure didn't know. They didn't know how it was going to affect us. They were shocked to see the ways that it kind of surfaced everything for us. And so that's one thing that hasn't changed. But I do think that overall now there's a better understanding of all that adoption and foster care entails. And it's not just this rosy picture as I think it was. I think it was more extremes back then of either it was like really, really seen as rosy or really, really not.
Right. And that comes, I guess, with just more information, right? We know more,
Totally.
which means and kind of lends itself to people being more afraid of it or being more able to engage with it on one side. It's just, there's just more to know about it and there's more research that's been done. Tell me a little bit about how you got started with siblings and your heart for bio kids in these types of spaces.
Yeah, it's actually kind of funny because I'd never set out like dreaming to do all the things I'm doing right now. And with siblings is one of those things that I didn't plan on. I actually had a friend who worked for an agency and it reached out to me and said, "Hey, we have this topic, not BioKid related, that we need someone to do a training on. Would you be willing?" And I said, "Sure." So I wrote that training. I did the training for their organization. And then I got to thinking like I could write one about BioKids. I bet people would be interested. And so then it was like, well, I bet I should probably just go ahead and do an LLC now. Well, I should probably go ahead and open a like social media account now. And so it just kind of snowballed and went from one training to now 9. And like, there's just so many things that have come from that. So it wasn't my intention, but that's kind of how I got here.
Yeah.
So my heart is really to fill in gaps.
Okay. What kind of gaps? What do you see as the main gaps for bio kids?
Yeah, well, gaps in this term or in terms of with siblings has to really be for the parents because I do have to really separate the work that I do. I can't just have, because therapy has to stay therapy and information has to stay information. And I can't muddle those in my work. So as far as with siblings, trying to fill in gaps in what parents know, because even to the point you were just making, when we don't have information, we feel powerless and we feel helpless. So with information, parents can feel more empowered to know how they can help their kids, to know how they can step into the space, to know if things get hard, here's what we can do. And even the freedom to know, like, I can take a step back and do respite or take a break if things get hard. This doesn't have to be lifelong with my bio kids if I feel like it's, anyway. So just helping to equip parents so that they feel empowered so then they can support their kids. But then I'd love to see systemic change, which is why I have a couple of professional trainings too, because how many times do I hear from parents, well, we asked our caseworker or we asked the licensing person and they said they don't know, or, oh, our bio kids will be fine. And I'm just like, there's so much more information we could give than just that. So just looking to fill kind of the information gaps and help parents just to be able to feel equipped to even just help their kids along the journey.
Yeah. Can you shed a little bit of light on just some of the things that you see as struggles for bio kids that aren't really being addressed? You mentioned that there's just gaps in knowledge. And, I think about it from my perspective as a foster and now adoptive family, and all of our kids are dealing with that in different ways. And I'm sure for a lot of families who are listening, wherever they are on that foster parent journey, whether they're about to start or in the middle or have been, we're so focused on all the needs that our kids have that are in the system and all of the needs and all the behaviors and all the, the trauma. But we sometimes, like you said, overlook what our bio kids are walking through, whether it's compassion fatigue or lack of control. I don't want to put things in your mouth. Those are my assumptions. But what do you see as those main gaps that families are asking for help for, and then the tools that you're giving them?
Yeah. So there is some research that's been done on bio kids. And so some of the themes I'll just kind of tell you that have come up in research are bio kids do report feelings of invisibility. And this could be from parents. It could be that siblings have maybe more intense needs or more severe behaviors. And so there can be invisibility in that regard. It can just be the fact that there's more people in the home. But it doesn't just have to be in the home. It can be outside of the home too. And I actually experienced this as a bio kid, where people would come and say hi to my new siblings and quite literally not say hi to me. People I've known my whole life. All of a sudden, I was just not new. And so now this new kiddo is getting a lot of welcome and a lot of love, and all of it they deserved, right? It's not like, oh, you didn't deserve that. But as a child trying to reconcile, why am I all of a sudden feeling like no one sees me anymore? And so invisibility is definitely something that bio kids report. And we see kind of a theme in the research of that, which is oddly enough why I named my children's book having to do with that theme of invisibility because of that. So that's one theme we see. We also can just see that they shift into these different roles, like the fixer, feeling like they need to help parents a lot. We see parentification in the research, which a lot of times we think of kiddos in care when we think of parentification, like an older sibling taking care of younger siblings. And maybe when they come into the foster home, it's hard for them to take out, not take that role on anymore. But that can be for bio kids too, where they take on the role of like a second or a third parent. And so we might see that, and that would kind of fall under fixer, maybe even defender, where they feel like if they perceive that the maybe extra stress on the parents or the new challenges are because of the new child that's been placed in their family, then they might feel like, well, they're the reason. They're the reason for the stress. I need to defend my home from them. I need to defend my family from them. And so they can kind of feel like they're on opposite teams and feel like they need to defend them. And then even just pleaser. These are the bio kids that don't seem to have a lot going on and they seem okay and well adjusted. Then they might be, but they also might just be kind of presenting that way in order to uphold the balance of the family in the best way they know how. So that's the tricky thing for parents, is realizing, is my kiddo okay? What areas do they need support from me? Are they taking on and holding family stress in a way that isn't theirs to bear, isn't theirs to carry? And so I would say those are some of the things that I do talk about in some of my trainings as well, just for parents to consider and to be aware of all along the way.
What kinds of tools are you putting in their hands? I know that there's full training sessions that go into some of these, but are there specific tools or strategies that you can share just as kind of sneak peeks that families can grab onto and get some support for?
Yeah, well, as far as like quite literally tangible, I have a monthly email, just one email a month, where I give some conversation starters, just some ideas for parents. Like, think about it. If you do one a week, you're checking in with them how many times with just a question that allows them to be open and honest about how they're feeling. And so even just things like that is a really tangible thing. I've got worksheets that refer to like feelings or how do I feel safe? What's in my control? What's not in my control? And so there are those things that are available to parents. But the reality is too, in the research, again, we see that there's a couple things that really make a difference. And one of those is communication. So that can involve all the things I just mentioned, but it can also just involve like making sure from the very beginning they're aware and on board and understand and all those kinds of things. And then communicating what's our family's plan from here. Maybe if a kiddo goes home, and allowing them input. And then another thing in the research is individual time, which is probably not a shocker to any of us. It's just kind of,
but it's so hard as a parent to get, right?
Yeah, and it's just easier said than done. Exactly. But it makes a difference for bio kids. And so I feel like a broken record, and like, it's like, there's no aha that's going to come when someone hears me say that, but that's the reality.
Yeah. And I can speak only for my own family. I think it's just, we're so focused on the things that we need to be focused on, and trying to help heal traumas, that there's those extra things that are not, like you said, they're not brain surgery, right? They're not crazy aha moments, but they are necessary. And if we're kind of not neglecting them in a negative sense, we're just not thinking as much about that. It's hard enough, being a parent and trying to do all the things right. But adding on that additional, it's just so needed, but not always at the forefront of our minds. Absolutely. Well, tell me a little bit about what you're doing with siblings, and what's your dream for it? What's your hope as you continue to work in that space?
Yeah, well, like I said, trainings are really the place that I primarily give information to parents. And up until actually very recently, these have just been hosted live through organizations, because it's just I feel like it's the best way to make it available to families, because so often parents have to find their own information. And there is a place for that, right? Like, we do have to educate ourselves, but I think me offering it through organizations was another way to I don't want to say buck the system, but in a way to say like, hey, you, the system, should be providing this for families. So that's how I've provided them until, again, recently. But now they're available. There's some of them available pre-recorded. So folks can like purchase them to watch them in groups, or there's an annual membership where organizations can actually get access to the pre-recorded ones for all families for a whole year. And so there's these things that I'm doing to make them, I'm hoping, more accessible to families, because I've heard, well, I really want to attend this, but like my agency won't offer it. Or, hey, I really want to attend this, but our families, or I want to offer this, but our families won't come to a live training. So can we do it recorded? I'm hoping by doing this, it becomes more available and it can reach further people. I have dreams of other ideas all of the time. Like, is there something that could be for bio kids themselves? But that one gets a little hard because we're talking about recording something. And then how do you make it applicable for ages? It would depend on every kid's development, and it would still ride heavily on the parents. So that's why I lean more towards giving parents the information as opposed to doing like a training for bio kids. But that's something I've thought about doing. My biggest hope is just that it will expand to reach bigger people. And then from there, I can expand to even more things, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think I love you being able to use your experience and your personal insight into this space. We always talk about finding your place along the river, right? What is your specific thing that you can bring to the table? And for you, it's your experience in the space and the wisdom that you've gained, and just the personal kind of testimony, right, that you have to be able to bring into the space and bring healing. That's just a really incredible blessing that you get to bring.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You mentioned a children's book. Can you tell us a little bit about what that is?
Yeah, it's called The Day Lily Turned Uninvisible. And it honestly is a book for all kids, because even when I was writing it, I was sending it to friends who weren't connected to the foster care adoption system at all. And they were sending me back feedback saying, oh my goodness, that's beautiful. I cried. And I'm thinking, why did you cry? You don't even understand what it's like to be that main character. But the reality is, we all do. We all know what it's like to feel invisible from time to time, whether that's like a new person at work or a new person in our faith community or a new person at school or whatever it might be. We all know what it's like when a new person comes and maybe they get a little more attention, and maybe people don't acknowledge, our acts of service as much anymore or whatever it is. So the main character is a bio kid in a foster family, but we see throughout the book that she feels invisible, but then her mom comes along and really just calls out, hey, I know you're feeling invisible and I know it's hurtful. Here's kind of the reason why people are giving this kiddo so much attention. And hey, look, this time when you felt invisible, I saw you. This time when you felt invisible, I saw you. And so we see at the end of the book that this little girl's perspective has changed. And people have actually reached out to me to say, hey, my kid wants to know, what was it that changed? And I left it open-ended on purpose because, I don't know, maybe the parents reached out to their friends and said, hey, my kid's feeling invisible. Could you just make sure you include them too again? Or maybe the newness wore off. And like maybe their friends were just kind of integrating this new kiddo a little bit more and it felt less new. Or maybe this little girl's perspective really did change. And so we just see, though, that something has changed at the end of the book, and she's able to recognize that she's valuable just because she's herself, not because of anything she does or not because of the attention that other people give her.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And it really speaks to that idea of helping one another to feel seen, right? When somebody,
Right.
especially an authority figure or a parent, is able to actually see what's going on in your life and make you feel like you're known and then also loved in the midst of wherever it is that you find yourself. Gosh, that's such a healing part of this whole journey.
Yeah, absolutely. And so often, I think probably parents feel this way too, but I know bio kids feel this way where it's like, ooh, I feel these feelings. Like maybe I feel resentful or I feel angry or jealous or whatever it might be that we kind of attribute to negative. We don't want it. It's undesirable to us. And bio kids often don't want to feel that way. They feel shame for feeling that way. And so maybe they won't express it, or maybe they won't express it to many people. And so it's really important that parents be receptive and accept whatever those emotions are, because they need to know they're not bad for feeling that way. The feelings are signs, or they're pointing to something. And so that's something I also try to really encourage parents about, because it's one thing to be seen, but it's another thing to also, like you said, be known, loved, and accepted for being, seen for how I'm really feeling.
Yeah, and so much of that starts with just creating space for it, right? Creating a space and an environment where it's okay to bring those things forward. I think that's something it's just such a challenge as a parent to intentionally create spaces where kids can feel comfortable sharing those emotions that aren't always the things that we love feeling, nor do other people tend to respond positively to those types of feelings. And so creating a really safe space where they can voice all of the things that feel ugly inside, but knowing that there's going to be compassion there and there's going to be safety and there's going to be love and concern and a space to hold them together, right?
Yeah. And it means we as parents need to do the work too, because there was a time when I was growing up when I kind of voiced my frustrations about like particular incident, and it wasn't near the kids that were placed in our home, but my parents could hear. And instead of that empathetic response, I was actually scolded for it. And my dad has talked to me about this. He knows I share the story because he was actually the one who was able to look back and say, hey, I responded in that way because you expressed exactly what I was feeling. And I couldn't handle that I was feeling that. So I couldn't handle that you were feeling that. And so that's really important. It's like if I, as a parent, am feeling resentful, well, I need to accept and manage that, because if my bio kid then feels resentful, I'm not going to know how to be accepting or empathetic of that emotion because I can't seem to be okay with it myself.
Yeah, way to go, Dad, with the self-awareness.
I know, right?
I mean, that's yeah. I'd love to chat with him. Having that type of self-awareness as a parent in that space, like I'm sure what you're doing now is reflecting so much of what you learned
Oh, yeah.
from the good and the mistakes, right, that your parents made. So,
Oh, yeah.
before we close, tell me a little bit more just about your parenting journey now, right? We talked about your upbringing and the uniqueness there and the professional side of what you're doing. Share a little bit about what your story is with foster care and bio kids and how this impacts your family now.
Yeah. Well, I had originally said that I was never going to foster or adopt, and I was very serious about that. And long story short, yeah, here we are. So we just came in with the intent to foster. We had no bio kids. My husband had only been married for a couple of years. I was working in the system. It was just like, why not us? I have all this experience, like literally tangible experience for like 10 plus years. Why would we not? We would make great foster parents. So we did that. And we were called for like a kiddo who already had some siblings in care. And so we were like, great, we'll take them for a little bit. We know that they'll put siblings together. And then 4 months later, we took those siblings. So then we, ended up with 3 kiddos. And then 6 months later, we adopted the 3 of them. And then a month later, their sibling who was just born moved in. And then about a year later, we adopted her. So that was kind of our foster care adoption journey, which is hilarious because it was not all planned, right? It's not how we intended it to go or anything like that. And then shortly after we adopted our 4th kiddo, our bio kid was born a few months after that. And then we've got 1 additional bio. So we definitely did it very differently than it was for me growing up. And I don't have regrets about that. In fact, there's a lot of things about my bio kids experience that is harder than it was for me. Like really, truly harder. And there are things that are easier. Like they don't know what it's like to feel replaced by a new kid joining the family because their adopted siblings were already here first. So that's something that they've never had to deal with. The like, oh, a new sibling's come, I feel invisible. They haven't had to deal with that. So there's definitely some differences, and they're not necessarily better or worse, but they're definitely different.
Yeah, there's definitely nuances to that. You mentioned that it didn't go according to like what you had planned or set out. I would love to meet a family where it actually did happen the way that they intended or planned, because I don't know that actually exists. I don't know. I've never talked to a family who's like, we set out to do foster care and this is exactly what we thought and it happened exactly the way we planned. It just doesn't happen in this space. You just got to live with the uncertainty. Goodness. Well, last thing before we go to our last 5. So last before the last. How can our listeners find out more about what you do, access some of these resources, access trainings, access your children's book? Where can we find you?
Yeah, well, I'm most active on Instagram. It's with_siblings. So that's where I'm most active. I have a lot of free content on there, those sorts of things. Also on Facebook. I've got a website withsiblings.org. And then I've got a Stan store. So it's stan.store/ with_siblings. And that's where like the trainings are, the worksheets are, free coloring pages for my children's book, those kinds of things. Free resources like a list. I put together a list of children's books that have been written for bio kids, not just my book, but other books. There's also an appreciation certificate that parents or even like professionals, caseworkers can give to bio kids. So that's a free download on there too. So those are really the best places to get the resources and the content and that kind of thing. Oh, and my book can be hardcovers a lot of places like Walmart, Barnes and Noble, like online, but Amazon, you can get ebook, paperback, or hardcover. So even though Amazon's quite a beast, that's where it's the easiest to get it.
Well, great. I really hope that some of our listeners are able to engage with you a little bit further. I'd love to just keep the conversation going because what you offer and the knowledge and the insight and the experience that you offer is really, really helpful, and I think can be a huge asset to families really across the states, but definitely here in our community.
Thank you.
The last thing that we do is just a last 5 rapid fire questions, just to get to know a little bit more about just who you are as a person. So I'm going to fire away. What is a book, show, or movie that you've recommended to others more than once?
Show This Is Us. Book, I'm recently recommending The Anxious Generation, like a lot. It is about screens and media and their effect on children. And it is really powerful with a lot of research and even just like tangible how-tos and like where do we go from here. So really good book.
Cool. I'm not going to make you do a movie. It was an or question, so you already did more.
Yeah, there we go.
Second question, do you have a favorite childhood snack that still hits the spot?
I was trying to think of this and it's hilarious. I think I realized what it is and it feels embarrassing. But like we have to bring snacks, right? We have to bring snacks for my kids' baseball game this weekend. And every time we have to, I get the same thing that I used to eat as a kid, Gushers. So I don't like go out and eat them all the time. But if we're being nostalgic, yeah, I will eat some Gushers.
Gushers is a 90s kid. I mean, I don't know exactly how old you are, but I feel like it's a 90s kid kind of snack. And it's still around, which is awesome. Good for them. The third question. This one's from our team. When was the last time you fell down? This is how random our team is. They got to throw one in there. When was the last time that you fell down?
Yeah, I was trying to think of this too. And the last time I can remember falling down, and I still have a scar from it. And my kids actually, I think, talked about it the other day. When I released my book, I decided I'd get out my unicycle, which I learned how to ride when I was 10, and I still fortunately can do. And so I was riding down my sidewalk holding my book so my husband could videotape me because what do? We do crazy things to sell books. And so I had lots of success, but I fell one time and I mean, I ate it. So my left knee has a nice big scar from that.
Oh my gosh. I don't know how you fall. You could fall gracefully from a unicycle. Let's be honest.
Fair.
If you're going to fall off of a unicycle, you're going to fall hard, right?
It's true. Yeah. I don't know how it would be pretty.
Fourth question. If you had a magic wand and could change one thing about how people talk to or support bio kids in foster adopt homes, what would you change? We kind of spoke about this a little bit, but is there one thing that you would change?
I guess I would change the perception because I think a lot of times there's this, well, these kids haven't experienced trauma, or, well, these kids, we don't get funding to help these kids. And so if I had a magic wand, I would, wave it and say, all kids are equally valuable, equally worthy of our time, have inherent worth, not because they've deserved it, not because they've earned it, but because they inherently just have it. And so that would be just my magic wand of the system in terms of bio kids.
That's a good one. Number 5, last question. If you could encourage our audience that are doing the hard work of inviting kids into their family, what would you say? It
would go along with my book, but also because I've needed it recently, of just a reminder that you are seen on the very hardest days, on the worst days, on the best days, when it seems like no one sees what you do. You have never been unseen. You have always been seen and loved in those moments. Not someone looking at you, judging you or thinking you should do better, but you're just seen and loved in those moments. And so that would just be my encouragement.
Yeah, it's a great one. Thank you so much for sharing that. And thank you for spending your time with us. I just want to reiterate that you're able to find resources from Daniela on our website, www.withsiblings.org, on Instagram @with_siblings, on Facebook, and this will all be in the show notes as well, facebook.com/withsiblingstx, and at her store, stanstore/with_siblings. Did I get all of that right, Daniela?
Yep, you got it right.
Awesome. Again, we'll put those in the show notes too, so you can access resources from Daniela. But Thank you so much again for spending your time with us, Daniela. It really is just a blessing to know you and to be connected with you in this space.
Thank you so much.
To those listening, we hope these conversations have inspired you to find your place along the river. And we welcome you to join us in bringing hope and renewal to the city of Houston. If you'd like more information on how to get involved, please visit riversideproject.org and submit a contact form. We'll see you next time.